Yang Rui coming to you live from Beijing. The haze may have been lessened a bit with the latest snowfall in Beijing, but public debates about air pollution show no sign of receding. Local authorities have finally agreed to release timely PM 2.5 data on the air quality to increase transparency and regain public confidence. But the demanding and skeptical public continues to wonder whether our children will be able to enjoy an environmentally friendly homeland should we fail to develop a low-carbon economy. And this is a global issue, especially for major emerging markets. Heavy smog descends on major cities, triggering debate and panic about fossil fuel consumption. Is this one of the wake-up calls that prompt a rethinking of our mode of development? Winter severity pales into warm mist and myth. Are we increasingly enslaved by the unpredictability of weather conditions? Should Beijing be relocated to be a simple political capital? Heavy pollution inundates headlines, prompting local authorities to limit exhaust fuel. Construction sites have been closed to reduce dust, but what are long-term solutions? And, ironically, the rise of living standards starts to hurt public health. How shall we supervise the air quality and tell the truth honestly to protect our lungs? Today we are happy to be joined here by Professor Qi Ye, Director of Climate Policy Initiative with Tsinghua University. Welcome to Dialogue, sir.
It's good to be with you.
Given the poor air quality of the capital city of Beijing, do you think it's a good idea to consider seriously relocating this capital city? Very much like, Washington and Canberra of Australia, they are purely political capital cities.
That's true. Yet I think that sounds like a good idea. I'm sure in the last couple of days, a lot of people may have considered about the question of relocation. You can relocate the capital, you can relocate the industry, you can relocate the pollution, or people just go away for more livable places.
I'm afraid some of them are really very radical by going as far as to consider seriously immigrating to a clean city or another country.
As a matter of fact, that's a very good point. When you ask a lot of people who have migrated into other countries, one of the concerns is the environmental quality for themselves and more for their family, their children. The problem is this. The pollutants followed people, and the people followed money, and the money followed political power. So you can relocate the capital, but pretty soon you will find the money follow the political power, and people will follow the money. And probably pretty soon you will find another city where you find same level of pollution.
By the way, when we address the issue of immigration, some of the radical angry youth on the internet or on Weibo may attribute the tidal waves of immigration from emerging markets to industrial countries to political system, which might be seriously flawed. However, when you look at the food security issues, the water quality, water pollution, water scarcity in a developing country like China, there are indeed good reasons for those well-educated and those who have financial muscles to immigrate to other countries, right?
Exactly. These people, they realize all of these problems you just mentioned are serious, and they are long-term, and they probably do not really see pretty soon prospect for a good improvement of this quality. However, this is a time we should not lose our optimism. We have to fight, and as you mentioned, several cities in the world which may have the same level or even worse situation as we face today. But now, when we look at London, look at other places, they are now great places. So this is a time we should not really, we should really keep our optimism. Professor
Qi, poor air quality doesn't come as a surprise as Beijingers, because this often occurs. Despite a temporary short-term improvement of the air quality before, during, and after the Beijing Olympic Games.
That's right.
However, this time around, many were shocked. We were caught unprepared by the heavy smog, hazardous smog. What are the attributors to the formation of the smog?
If we look at the analysis, look at the data, there are several factors, of course. The people will first look at the weather condition, right? The weather condition for this particular instance is a major factor. However, we must have also look at the other factors, the human factors, which is the pollution, which comes from not only the traffic, not only the industry within Beijing, not only all the human activities within the capital, but also what's happening in the neighboring areas. In Hebei province, in Shanxi, in Inner Mongolia, there's a power plant, for example, manufacturing plants. They are emitting lots of sulfur dioxide, other kind of the aerosols, particulates, and which moving together with this weather. So the combination of both natural and human factors made this a particularly bad situation as we face in the last couple of days.
Emergency preventive measures have been taken by local authorities in Beijing. Do they also include, for example, proposed closures of some of the labor-intensive manufacturing centers in our neighboring provinces and autonomous regions, which depend on coal burning for much of their energy consumption?
I have seen reports on the neighboring cities, like in cities in the capital city of Hebei province, and they have the ordered to close down some of the polluting industry for a couple of days temporarily. You mentioned the Olympic. During and before the Olympic, we have seen many closures of the suspension of the polluting industry, and which contributed a lot to the good air quality during the Olympic. I mean, this tells something. This is control the air pollution in Beijing is not just a responsibility within the capital city area, but also in the neighboring provinces.
And the Vice Premier Li Keqiang said, perhaps yesterday, that since this is an accumulation of years of industrialization regarding the air quality, it might take a long while to find a good solution. What do you think?
I think he's absolutely right. The recognizing the seriousness of the problem and also recognizing the tough choice we have to make is really the very good first step. However, we cannot wait. The people cannot wait. Our health, our children's health is in stake, and we have to take the immediate measures right now and while planning for a longer term, dealing with the root causes. I think we have to act in both the immediate steps and also in the longer term planning.
Increasingly, government officials are being held accountable, given the mounting pressure of public opinions. If you look at debates on Weibo and on the internet, what do you think of the scrutiny that the public imposes on government officials, accountability, because we are all stakeholders in the same boat, perhaps?
I think I'm very sympathetic about the debate, on Weibo, on other platforms. The government should be held responsible, for a lot of what's happening right now. After all, it is the government that have to take the responsibility of regulation. Environmental issues in every country, including China, particularly in China, the government lacks enforcement of the laws, the regulation, and also promoting for very rapid, massive economic development has a lot to do is what we are experiencing nowadays.
One of the sensitive issues is perhaps has a lot to do with the U.S. Embassy, which was the first to release the PM 2.5 data, and that caused protests from similar, environmental agency here in China, in Beijing, to be more specific. But these days, the Beijing government has become pretty more open. This is of course welcomed by the general public.
The information disclosure, particularly on the information that related to the general public, for the health of the public, this information disclosure is really critical. It's key to a better environmental regulation, environmental enforcement. I'm very glad to see that the openness recently, starting this year, to release the data on PM 2.5 and other pollutants. And we would like to see more of involvement of the public. You just mentioned the responsibility of the government. But at the same time, as part of the general public, we have to realize the public have really great the responsibility for what's happening now, and we can do a lot.
Indeed, they have very strong incentives and legitimate concerns about the quality of their life. In fact, the air quality readings have well been pushed off the charts.
Exactly.
And so the government officials got to respond very quickly to
Yes.
public concerns to show their growing accountability. That goes back to what happened back in 2003 when atypical, sort of pneumonia diseases occurred. The SARS occurred.
Exactly.
Initially, the local authorities tried in vain to cover up the ugly outbreak of an epidemic disease. So, and they paid a heavy price politically,
Exactly.
of course. What do you think of, say, the due and the proper behavior of responsibility on the side of the government so that a broader scope or scale of epidemics could be prevented before it's too late?
I think when you compare 2003 and right now 2013, within only 1 decade, we have seen a huge contrast between these two incidents. One is the government try to cover up, trying to hide the information, but right now we see the information is being released to the general public, and invite the general public to be part of this debate. I think that's a major change in the public governance, and this is one of the very important reason. We should be optimistic about this. I know how bad it is. I know it will take a long time, but we really need to keep up the effort and also the optimism on this issue. We do see progress being made.
Let's look at whether it's a good idea to have mega cities. Beijing has a population of 20 million, to say nothing of thousands upon thousands of floating population. And similarly, we have 4 million automobiles, and each passing day, we have 7,000 brand new automobiles appearing on the roads, on the streets of the city. Despite the tough measures of lucky draw, when it comes to the plate number, and encouraging people to use public transport means instead of buying or turning to automobiles of the families. What do you think of, say, the mounting pressure on the environment and resources when we look at the intensity of the population in megacities? Should we encourage the development of second-tier cities, small to medium-sized cities?
I think this is exactly the key of this issue. Beijing, as large as it is, more than 20 million people are already. This size already exceeded to the carrying capacity of this region. This is a major issue. Although we understand this is subject to debate, we have to address this issue. We have to set a red line around the city, around the size of the population, in order to properly address this issue, including the population size of cars.
And in fact, the sizable population of 657 cities in China is twice the size of the Eurozone population.
Exactly.
That's indeed a formidable pressure for the local authorities and the environment in the first place. With that, we come to the end of the first part of our interview with Professor Qi, Director of Climate Policy Initiative with Tsinghua University. We'll be back in a few minutes. And when we come back, we'll be joined by David Rustein, a medical expert, and he'll address public health issues as a result of the climate change. For example, the heavy smog. Don't go away.
The air pollution is quite serious. I'm already wearing a mask, but I still feel uncomfortable. It's awful. The air doesn't smell right.
It was quite bad yesterday. I rode my bicycle for 2 hours and I didn't feel very good.
It's Sunday today. My son wants to go to the park, but I'm worried about the effect of the air pollution on his health.
Beijing has been covered by the hazy weather for quite a while. The media is constantly talking about the air pollution. I tried not to take my daughter outdoors to avoid the pollution, but she got ill, so I have to take her to the doctor.
The temperature and humidity in Beijing have been rising over the last few days, which isn't allowing the pollutants in the air to disperse. It's caused the extreme haze in Beijing over the past 3 days.
The main cause of the heavy pollution are the emissions from vehicles, the burning of coal, construction dust, and industrial waste. Current atmospheric conditions are not conducive to the dispersal of pollutants. Ideally, wind is needed.
Fog is a natural phenomenon. In itself, fog poses no harm to human health. The only way to improve air quality and prevent smog forming is to cut fuel emissions.
Welcome back. We are pleased to be joined here in the second half of the program by Mr. David Rothstein, Vice President of Medical Affairs from the United Family Hospital in Beijing. We are also joined here, of course, by Professor Qie, Director of Public Policy Initiative with Tsinghua University. Welcome to Dialogue, sir. Now, David, you're late, but we have tons of questions for you. For example, people are wondering aloud why all of a sudden there is a surge in number of patients who suffer respiratory disease when Beijing was shrouded with hazardous smog.
Well, I think you explained the reason, because Beijing was shrouded with hazardous smog. And the reason for that is very complex. I'm sure our climate expert can explain better than me the reasons for it. But the net result is that people who are already sensitive to respiratory ailments, people who are elderly, people who already have emphysema, asthma, bronchitis, or cardiovascular disease, are sensitive to any increase in pollutants in the air. They will react to it, and they will show up at medical facilities.
Do you feel you had an uncomfortable throat during the past few days, Qie?
I certainly do, and I get off.
Is that psychological effect, or you think this is the air, the poor air quality, very dirty?
I think it's real. I spent 2 weeks in San Francisco, and coming back from the airport, and by the time I get home, I already feel that impact. By the way, I just came back to see my parents, and my mom just recently suffered from this same problem. So we see this is not just isolated incidences.
There's a hike in sales for clean air products in markets and shops. You name it. Will filter masks help, for example?
Filter masks, if they're the right masks, will help. Particularly ones that filter out very, very small particles. Classically, these are called N95 masks. They filter out 95% of particulate matter. The catch is that they're not so comfortable to wear. They require some proper fitting, and in order to be effective, you have to wear them. And many people buy masks and then wear them for a little while and take them off. Of course, that doesn't do them any good.
What do you think of the psychological spillover if you find more people wearing filter masks? That gives you the strong indication that this is not a place for you to live. And I mean, it could be it could be very bad. Symbols about not an environmentally friendly place. So, what? Let's look at, say, the clean air products like. In your home, you install a machine to sort of filter the poor and dirty air. And then what about outdoor activities?
Well, indoor filters are becoming more popular. But you're exactly right. When you go outside, you're going to be exposed to the ambient air, which contains whatever pollutants are in it. That said, there are things that you can do to reduce the exposure once you are outside. Not exercising outside, because that causes you to breathe deeper. Going outside for limited times. and particularly the activity of small children outside. These are of some concern.
Now, some of the primary schools in the most polluted cities have decided not to hold the flag-raising ceremonies to reduce the outdoor time for kids, you know, to avoid inhaling the hazardous particles. Having said this, what are the other preventive measures that could be taken to minimize the negative impact of the poor air quality? For example, do we have to take some medicine, pills, to increase our immune system, I mean to enhance the immune system?
There's no reputable data on taking any medicine to reduce the risk of air pollutants. That said, the data on the actual hazard of air pollution is not very strong either. So we know that some of the toxins found in classical air pollution, nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, ozone, etc., these individually have some toxic effects. But no one has been able to really ascertain what the risk is in terms of life years lost or long-term chronic effects of prolonged exposure to air pollution. So doctors like to speak with data. And I can tell you that the data is just not very clear on this. Common sense says to try and reduce the exposure, and that really means avoiding going outside unless you have to. Don't exercise outside unless you have to.
Before you came over, we were discussing the dramatic increase in number of vehicles, particularly automobiles in roads and streets of major cities like Beijing and Shanghai, increasingly in second-tier cities as well. Now, the issue is the government would do whatever they can to encourage the use of public transport means. However, when we follow very closely the release of PM 2.5 data, people got the feeling of being scared, and they would probably tend to, for those who are especially environmentally aware, they want to use the subsystem. However, what do you think of the risks of contracting flu diseases in times of Beijing cough and Beijing flu?
Well, the risk of contracting flu during flu season is real. But luckily, there is a medicine that can prevent the flu, and that's called the immunization against the annual flu. And it's not too late for people to be immunized, and it's something I would recommend, especially now during periods of high pollution, when they might be exposed to other irritants in the respiratory tract.
A few days ago, Governor of New York State ordered vaccination be administered to local citizens to prepare them for the local flu, New York flu. Do you think similar things might be done by the Beijing municipal government to, to have vaccination ready?
I think probably the government should encourage people to consider the immunization for the flu and for other public health related matters. My family, my parents' family, for example, they're all, both my parents and my other relatives, they do the same. But what David is saying is, once this thing is there, the pollution is there, it's really very, very not that much to do other than just to reduce the exposure, and really have little to do. The problem now is we really need to address the root causes of this problem to prevent the pollution to take place or to go really bad. Right?
Are you sure that with the intensity of industrialization going on in major emerging markets such as China, similar public health crisis will occur? We'll see greater frequency of such epidemic outbreaks. Maybe the use of the word outbreak is a little bit too strong, but people are increasingly aware about their own health and the quality of life. David?
I absolutely agree. This happens in every country that becomes rapidly industrialized, and particularly when we see a shift from rural communities to more urban, crowded communities, the rates of both acute and chronic illnesses rise. So I'm not at all surprised that this is happening in China as well.
In the past few days, the Beijing government has also ordered the closure of some of the selected construction sites in the hope of avoiding an escalation of toxic particles in the air. From the medical perspective, how harmful are the dusts from the construction site? Because for years China has both benefited and suffered from the construction boom from different angles. I mean, it depends on the angles.
This is a good strategy. It's been adopted in Mexico City and London and other very polluted cities as well. Dusts from construction sites add to the particulate matter that can be coming from coal burning or exhaust from automobiles. So anything that reduces the overall particulate matter, the irritants to the respiratory tract, is a good strategy.
Pollution, that's a constant haunting specter for residents of a major city like Beijing. Today I was discussing with some of the friends about the pace of urbanization in China. Vice Premier Li Keqiang says urbanization should be the driver for China's sustainable development. And then if frequency of such smog increases with the industrialization, how shall we prepare ourselves for further urbanization from the perspective of an environmentalist?
When we were talking about urbanization, we have already seen a decade of very rapid and massive urbanization, large scale. We're about to see another decade, probably even greater scale urbanization. And urbanization is proposed as a measure to drive the economy. And now we should be very, very cautious and very prepared, for what to come. The risk, what we're about to see for the next decade, together with massive urbanization, is more of this will be happening. So this is we have to consider the change of the mode of economic development and urbanization.
That indeed has called into question the mode of Chinese development, whether it's applicable elsewhere in the world. Public opinion has started to shape policies thanks to a burgeoning middle class. When 500 million internet users are mindful of their quality of life, government officials have to be held accountable. This embodies the critical relationship between water and the boat. Power means responsibility for those in charge. I'm Yang Rui. Be sure that you join us next time if you believe that we tell you the truth through balanced discussions. Until then, goodbye. I'm Yang Rui, coming to you live from Beijing. The haze may have been lessened a bit with the latest snowfall in Beijing, but public debates about air pollution show no sign of receding. Local authorities have finally agreed to release timely PM 2.5 data on the air quality to increase transparency and regain public confidence. But the demanding and skeptical public continues to wonder whether our children will be able to enjoy an environmentally friendly homeland should we fail to develop a low-carbon economy. And this is a global issue, especially for major emerging markets. Heavy smog descends on major cities, Today we are happy to be joined here by Professor Qi Ye, Director of Climate Policy Initiative with Tsinghua University. Welcome to Dialogue, sir.
It's good to be with you.
Given the poor air quality of the capital city of Beijing, do you think it's a good idea to consider seriously relocating this capital city? Very much like, Washington and Canberra of Australia, they are purely political capital cities.
That's true. Yet I think that sounds like a good idea. I'm sure in the last couple of days, a lot of people may have, considered about the question of relocation. You can relocate the capital, you can relocate the industry, you can relocate the pollution, or people just go away for more livable places.
I'm afraid some of them are really very radical by going as far as to consider seriously immigrating to a clean city. During debate and panic about fossil fuel consumption, is this one of the wake-up calls that prompt a rethinking of our mode of development? Winter severity pales into warm mist and myth. Are we increasingly enslaved by the unpredictability of weather conditions? Should Beijing be relocated to be a simple political capital? Heavy pollution inundates headlines, prompting local authorities to limit exhaust fuel. Construction sites have been closed to reduce dust, but what are long-term solutions? And, ironically, the rise of living standards starts to hurt public health. How shall we supervise the air quality and tell the truth honestly to protect our lungs? The food security issues, the water quality, water pollution, water scarcity in a developing country like China, there are indeed good reasons for those well-educated and those who have financial muscles to immigrate to other countries, right?
Exactly. These people, they realize all of these problems you just mentioned are serious, and they are long-term, and they probably do not really see pretty soon prospect for a good improvement of this quality. However, this is a time we should not lose our optimism. We have to fight, and as you mentioned, several cities in the world which may have the same level or even worse situation as we face today. But now, when we look at London, look at other places, they are now great places.
Another country.
As a matter of fact, that's a very good point. When you ask a lot of people who have migrated into other countries, one of the concerns is the environmental quality for themselves and more for their family, their children. The problem is this. The pollutants follow the people, and the people follow money, and the money follows political power. So you can relocate the capital, but pretty soon you will find the money follow the political power, and people will follow the money. And probably pretty soon you will find another city where you find same level of pollution.
By the way, when we address the issue of immigration, some of the radical angry youth on the internet or on Weibo may attribute the tidal waves of immigration from emerging markets to industrial countries to political system, which might be seriously flawed. However, when you look at